What happens when the person running the finances is also advising elected officials while simultaneously serving on councils themselves? What if your local government had almost no staff, limited funding, centuries of tradition, and residents who still expected professional services and accountability? In the United States, local government professionals often assume our systems are unique, but across the Atlantic, public servants in the United Kingdom are wrestling with many of the same pressures we are: political tension, public distrust, social media outrage, burnout, staffing shortages, and the challenge of keeping institutions functioning in an increasingly emotional world. But they're doing it inside a completely different governmental structure. Today, we're joined by Lewis Anderson, a local government practitioner from Burton-upon-Trent, England, who wears more hats than almost anyone I've ever interviewed. Clerk, responsible financial officer, councillor, internal auditor, consultant, and through his story, we're going to explore not just how local government works in the United Kingdom, but what the human experience of public service looks like when viewed from the other side of the ocean. Welcome to Gov360, your full circle view on local government leadership. And now, the most watched local government podcast in America. One of the things I've wanted to do more of with this podcast is broaden the conversation beyond the United States and explore how local government functions around the world. Because while our system may look different structurally, the underlying challenges facing public servants are often remarkably similar. Today's guest is Lewis Anderson from Burton-upon-Trent, England, a town of more than 76,000 residents in the county of Staffordshire. Lewis has an incredibly unique background that spans multiple roles in local government, including clerk and responsible financial officer for parish councils, internal auditor, consultant, trainer, counselor, and governance advisor. What immediately caught my attention when Lewis reached out was how different the structure of local government is in the UK compared to what we're used to here in the United States. In many British local governments, particularly parish councils, a single professional may simultaneously manage administration, finance, governance compliance, meeting procedures, and operational coordination. At the same time, Lewis's story reflects something universal in public service. People entering this profession because they genuinely care about their communities, then learning how difficult and emotionally demanding the work can become. Today, we're going to compare the US and UK systems, talk about the realities of modern public service, discuss the future of local government leadership, and explore why so many of the pressures we face are becoming global. So, Lewis, you have really a fascinating background, and maybe your background is typical in the UK, or maybe not. I'm not sure, but you wear an awful lot of hats, and I'd like to delve into that. But first, let's kind of explore your journey into public service. How did you get into public service?
No, thanks, Chris. Really good question, and it's very untypical, I think, my route into certainly local councils, particularly because of my age, I think. And I had the pleasure, many may see it as a displeasure, of working alongside many parish and town councils from a very young age through a lot of community work I was involved in. So very much started in that voluntary sector side of things, looking to deliver things for local residents. But over time, it became very clear, to be honest, that some of the things that we wanted to do, the decisions were out of our control. And I thought that councillors and councils near me were making those wrong decisions, which is what really inspired me to get involved in politics as a councillor. I became a councillor at 18.
Wow.
But then very much jumped the other side of the coin and thought, I'm really enjoying this, from a governance point of view. And it turned into, well, at least so far, a very rewarding career.
That's fantastic. So 18, that's incredible. That's incredible. I had a young start myself. When I was in college, I started attending a council meeting in the city where I lived. And my senior year, I decided, I'm gonna run. And right after graduation, I launched a campaign. And at 23, I was elected to a council out here. But 18, you have me beat. That's impressive.
Well, it was a month after my 18th birthday, so I think for a period I was the youngest councillor in the UK. But it's a period that doesn't last long until someone comes nipping at your heels.
That's true. Yeah. So, I mean, at such a young age, what sparked your interest?
I think it was just the ability to get things done. Like I say, it was through that community route. I was very much involved in trying to deliver things for local people. And I very simply disagreed with some of the decisions that were happening. I've tried the party politics stuff. It wasn't really for me. But it was simply that love of being local and listening to local people and listening to what they want to do and try and achieving it for them. That, I think, is where my real passion is. And I think, across your mentioned number of hats, I think that's the common element running through them is simply trying to solve problems for people, really. It's always been where my interest lies.
What was, at the age of 18, what was that process like running? I'm not being familiar with the political system in the UK. You were running, was it a parish council, or what was it you were running for to become a councillor?
So it was a parish council initially. So I was fortunate, if you want to use that word, to be represented by a parish council that actually didn't have enough councillors. And I think probably from the age of 16, they were trying to recruit me, which shows what a fun childhood I had, doesn't it? But it meant that when I turned 18, I was able to stand for co-option to a vacant role, because basically no one had stood in the election for that role. But the following May, so 6-7 months later, I ended up standing in 4 elections for councillor. So 3 very local, hyper-local parish councils, all within 3 miles from my door. So it shows you the size we're talking about. And then a larger council, a borough council position too. So the process for co-option was very straightforward. It was a couple of interview questions, and by that time they probably knew what they were getting in for me. The election side of things, obviously completely different cup of tea. You are you much in the US, you're putting your name forward and people make the decision. And where I stood for a party, it wasn't the in party. It obviously didn't go my way, but very pleased that on the background of community work, I was pleased with how I did. I've loved to have got on that council, but there was the 3 parishes that I then ended up working on at the same time. So it meant really from a very young age, I've had quite a lot of experience quite quickly of a range of different local parish councils and how they operate, and not always well, sometimes very well, but get that good flavour, which I think is what really sparked my passion for wanting to work in the sector as well. So
at such a young age, entering into this world of politics, was it what you thought it would be? Was it more complicated than you initially expected? What was that experience like coming in?
It's a very good question, and I suppose it wasn't really that long ago, but it feels a hell of a long time ago. And I think I knew what I was getting in for, but I know plenty of people who don't, and it was probably because I was working alongside a lot of councillors and council officers for some time. But the big, it can't not be noticed that the average age of councillors in the UK is about 60, 70 years old.
Wow.
It's declining. It might be a little bit below that now, but I was definitely on the younger side. And it obviously means that the things that I look to raise, perhaps the way I go about trying to raise things as a councillor and as an officer, are perhaps slightly different to what people are used to. And so that sort of culture shock, if you like, probably as much to them as it was to me, was definitely something I noticed early. Absolutely.
So most people in the United States are not familiar with the system of government in the UK. I think we're familiar with Parliament, the things we see on the major news channels, but at the local level, I imagine there's some pretty significant differences. And just doing a little bit of reading up, it seems that perhaps kind of the party system is more prominent at the local level in the UK than it is in the US. Did you find that to be the case? Do you run affiliated with, for example, I think you're a member of the Labour Party. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So did that factor into your race at the councillor level?
Not at the parish council level.
Okay.
So we've got quite what's getting even more complex local government sort of set up in the UK, because we're currently going through some changes, but we've got sort of between 2 and 3 different tiers depending really where you are. That lowest level is the parish and town councils, obviously covering the parishes. Going back, it links to the church really, the parochial parish a church would cover, so the very historical or towns that have been set up. And then above that you've got the district or borough councils. There's about 150, 160 of those. Above those, county councils, covering the 20 odd councils in England. And then we've got combined authorities or unitary authorities trying to do all of it at once. So we've got quite a big flavour. And I think with those upper tier authorities, so the boroughs, the counties, the unitaries, there tends to be far more party politics. You know, you generally wouldn't go very far standing as an independent, which I've preferred to do, certainly on the local level, because you get to stand, in my view, a bit more honestly for yourself. You get to stand on the work perhaps you've done or the work that you want to do, rather than a wider ticket you've perhaps got a bit less control of. Whereas that parish and town council, the very local, the very most local level, there's far less party politics. But as these changes go on to the tiers above, I think we're going to get far more party political. There will be far less seats for people who've previously represented councils who probably very much enjoy being a councillor. So I think we've got some interesting changes coming through that for what is a sector generally not too political will very much become embedded by party politics in the next few years. So it's a very interesting one. And to be honest, I don't think many people in England and Wales have caught on to that yet. We've got perhaps a big wave coming of party politics, but that's a question for another time, I think.
Well, that's not unique to the UK. It seems like politics is permeating everything today. And here in the United States and in California, especially, you know, at the city level, those races are nonpartisan. You know, you run, in fact, you can't even legally identify which party you belong to in your, on the ballot itself, in your ballot statement itself. That doesn't mean the parties don't get involved. The parties certainly support candidates that they like, but it's not, you don't run as a member of a political party at the city or county level. Once you go to the state level, and certainly federal level, then that's different. Then you do run on a party platform. I've seen a trend over recent years where there's an attempt to politicize everything in a partisan way, right? And so, even though you don't run as a Republican or Democrat or it's hiding in the background. And then once you get elected, your constituents expect you to chime in on partisan issues, even though your role at the city level is to provide municipal services, right? And that's as a city manager, that's something that I really try to advise my council members on is, look, let's try as best as we can to stay focused on what our job is, because when we bring in these kind of a state or federal, partisan issues, then it's a distraction. It divides the community unnecessarily, and we're not being effective at what our job really is. But it's an uphill battle. Everything is so political now.
Absolutely, and it's the same thing we're seeing. As I said, it's definitely becoming more party political, even if not formally. You will have people who perhaps are double hatter councillors, sit on another council as a party political figure, but sit formally independent on a parish or town. And it's very clear what their affiliations are, and it's very clear what everyone in the room thinks of their affiliation, whether they agree or they disagree. So I completely get that, and I find it quite frustrating, to be honest, because I struggle to see what is party political about the local services that we run. You would hope that there is consensus in that. there might be disagreements over what we prioritise, what we do first, what we perhaps need to look at cutting back to deliver something else. But I don't see those divides on a local level by a national party policy platform. And to be frank, I don't think the National Party politicians would give a damn what we're doing at that local level, even though it's very important to the local community. So it's a shame when it does become quite rivaled in that sense, in my view. But it happens. It's a fact of life. And it's certainly something as officers that we're having to deal with more in the UK.
I wish here that the elected officials at the state and federal level cared a little bit less what we do at the local level, because a growing trend, especially here in California, is to take some control away from the local level, especially as it pertains to land use. And that's frustrating, because determining your community's future from a land use perspective is one of the main reasons that areas decide to incorporate as cities in the first place here. So, but the state, they feel they know best. So it's a struggle. You mentioned something about that reminded me about a saying here. But when we're talking about politics, partisan politics at the local level, there's a saying here that there's no Republican or Democrat way to fill a pothole, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I truly believe that we need to represent everybody and focus on the mission. Now, you wear a lot of hats, so these titles are not familiar to most people here in the United States. So maybe help us understand, what is a clerk and responsible financial officer?
No, thanks, Chris. And I think that the role of clerk is relatively interchangeable with sort of your city manager and so on. I know you've got city clerks as well.
Yes.
It really is, for want of a better phrase, the chief executive of a very small council in the UK. We've got a range of councils that go from budgets of a couple of £100, literally, up to millions, and they are growing. I appreciate yours go far larger than that, your city councils, but to us that's a very large range, and all of them will have a clerk as a named officer at the top. It may be that they play around with the title. So on one council, I'm a principal officer. I've been a clerk. I've seen others who do go by CEO or chief executive or executive officer.
Okay.
I think people have a good game of Scrabble trying to come up with their titles at times, but it suits the role. And that other role of RFO, responsible financial officer, at those larger councils will be a separate person. Someone who is formally in law, it's a role that's set out in law as responsible for the finances of the local authority of the council. Section 151 of the Local Government Act, if you're very keen. But it really sets out those responsibilities. And with those smaller authorities, ones with much smaller budgets, far fewer staff, often those roles will merge. So you've got someone who is both chief executive and head of finance, and those roles merge. So at the council I work at, there's me and another part-time employee at the moment. We're still a very small one, budget of around 80,000, or some of the funds in the bank. Means I hold both of those titles, and my other employee supports very well in both areas. So there's no sort of uniform staffing structure, but those two roles will be everywhere you go in local government in the UK.
Interesting. And so with such a small organization, I mean, that must be incredibly challenging. What municipal functions does that unit of government provide? What's it responsible for?
Well, formally, there's nothing that we need to do. There's nothing that we have as statutory responsibilities, things that we must do, other than the odd bit of process and so on. So we don't manage elections; they're managed above us. But I think that's really where my love for the sector comes, because it gives you far more flexibility in terms of what you can do. Everything that we do is sourced from a power in law. So much as an individual does everything until the law tells them not to. A council can do nothing until a law tells them they can do it. That principle still applies to us, other than some funny quirks. It gives great flexibility. So whether it's community events, whether it's increasingly local councils are looking at sort of health initiatives, public health, public well-being, be that through the maintenance of land and parks and recreation areas, allotments, or working in partnership with other bodies too. It can be your bush shelters and your bins and all the fun stuff like that, right up to there's people who have proper maintenance teams who do street cleaning and maintain lights for areas, and some even maintain small pots of social housing and housing for those on low incomes. So that, to me, that's the beauty of it, is the fact that there's nothing we must do, but there's a lot that we can do, which gives such a personality to every one of the 10,000 parish and town councils in the UK.
That sounds nice, actually. Yeah. So you were actually recently in the US for a conference of clerks.
Absolutely.
Was that what you expected? I assume my assumption is that that was kind of focused around our city clerk role here, which is probably one small portion of your responsibility. I'm just interested in that comparison between your role and when you came to the conference and you're interacting with clerks here in the U.S. What differences you're seeing there?
No, absolutely. So it was the IIMC International Institute for Municipal Clerks conference I was at in Reno, in Nevada. So we did hop over to California for a very brief moment. Yeah. It was very, very nice. Well, I have to admit, it's sunnier in the UK at the moment. Not often that happens.
Very true.
I had to get that one in while I can. It's not often we can. But no, it surprised me whilst the responsibilities of the role may differ. There may be different duties that clerks in the US have to the UK. I think the same principles are there, that same shared, perhaps frustrations, those same shared successes in terms of what it's like running and being part of local government was there. So it felt quite bizarre, really, to be in a completely foreign country, one I'd never visited before, certainly not been that far from the UK before, but surrounded by people who got the job that I do. And I had wonderful conversations with a range of clerks from all over the US. And that, as I say, those same principles were there, that wish for public service, of doing things fairly and competently and independently of the political administration of councils. And that wish for the municipalities to really be that local form of local government, to serve every individual where perhaps other tiers of authority are simply too large to do. So it was a wonderful experience of almost commonality between the countries. So really glad I got the opportunity to go.
Yeah, I do suspect that there are more things that our systems of government have in common than are different when you talk about the human experience of it, right?
Absolutely.
And the motivations behind it and the reasons people get involved. Were there any big surprises? Did anything surprise you about what you learned about how things are done here or the people that are serving in local government?
Well, I mean, the obvious one for me really is the scale of the US, and obviously the differences there are per state for the way municipalities and towns will be run. So that was one thing. In England and Wales, we generally have the exact same legislation covering all local authorities. We've recently had some tweaks in Wales to devolved administrations over there, but by and large, we operate on the same laws, doing the same things. We certainly don't run elections. It would scare me if the size of some of our councils tried to run elections, but we do pay for them. So we do pay for them and maintain a budget. So we're still supporting that, but it's certainly not something that we run ourselves. And the size of the teams too. I think I struggled to come across a clerk who worked independently, that didn't have a team below them, sometimes a very large team. And I think in the UK, there's often almost a wariness towards that, of spending too much on a staffing resource and instead wanting to invest more in projects. Not all the time, but I think there's definitely that consciousness of trying to keep staffing levels low at times. So it was a completely different reflection, because quite simply, there's a lot more administration, from the sounds of it, to do for a municipality in the US compared to us.
Yeah, no, and what you mentioned about, wanting to keep staff sizes under control, so that the funds can be spent on infrastructure or projects. That's a theme here too. Despite the scale that some of our entities have grown to, but it's that can certainly become a political issue. Certainly when you're talking about rapidly growing the size of an organization or increasing compensation significantly, those things can become controversial. But also, there's just so much regulation and so many responsibilities that are thrown on local government here that you almost need the staff support to keep up. So where I work, population approaching 40,000 in the city, and we have a staff size of about 55 or so currently, but that does not include police or fire service, because we provide those services through a contract with the county level of government. Now, where some cities have their own in-house police and fire, which would probably double the size of our staff if we did that. So, and we're
certainly nowhere near responsible for police, fire, and crime. We do have separate elected figures in the UK now for police and fire and crime commissioners, and again at the county level. But again, there's much debate whether they stay an elected role or whether they become more appointed by the other authorities that are out there. So that's a big difference, isn't it? Maintaining your police force. And I noticed during our little time I got to explore around Reno, around Los Angeles, where our connecting flight was, that you often had City Hall next to police department or so on, showing how interconnected they are. We often struggle to try and get in touch with the police at times. We wish we had better links. So perhaps that's what we need to do. We need to take control of the police at our level.
Well, as administrators, we design it that way so we can keep our elected officials in check.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. We have to have the police. We have to have the police right there to make sure no, just kidding. One of the things that I suspect is a common experience across the ocean is with the advent of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, public service here has become much more emotionally challenging over time. And the amount of public scrutiny, the toxicity in public discourse, the decline in civility in public discourse has made it much more difficult to lead, both on the elected side and on the staff side. And we're seeing a lot of people just burn out and decide to do something else with their lives, unfortunately, as a result of it. I have to assume similar things are happening in the UK.
Unfortunately, yes. And I think a lot of the trends that perhaps commence in the US are coming, over our way. I think social media is universal, isn't it? The impact it has. There are many great benefits for local government, for councils, for municipalities to engage with residents, to communicate. But it also allows that instant reaction to be given, where otherwise, if you wanted to go and have a go at your local councillor or your local clerk, you'd have to get in your car or put your walking boots on, stroll a few miles down the road and knock at the building or at the house or whatever and collar them in the street. Whereas now you can do it from the comfort of your armchair, or you're sat in the bath, wherever you are, instantly. And that access, there's great benefits again that comes with that access, but it also gives people the right to give that quick opinion, be it good, be it bad. And we've certainly seen a more toxic politics take over, even at that local level. You'll have far more vocal residents, and I'm all in favour of residents being able to share their opinions, but feel they have the right to talk in a manner in which they don't. Far more personal, far more vicious, far more attacking. I've seen it as a councillor, on social media, had things targeted at me, funny photos edited and all that. As an officer, less so. But I certainly know officers that have suffered far worse than I have with it, from both members of the public and councillors too, sadly. And in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of work done by the SLCC, so a body, Society of Local Council Clerks, and now a National Association of Local Councils and others, to put together what's actually a civility and respect pledge in councils to keep conduct at that high level. It doesn't fix all the problems, but it creates that awareness of what that standard should be. And I suppose the only other bit to mention is our standards regime. We do have codes of conduct which are enforceable, but they are toothless. They are toothless, particularly at our level. And if a complaint is put in and a councillor is found to be guilty, whilst at other layers of government they may be suspended, or they may even be docked if they're being paid an allowance for their role that can be docked in pay. Often parish town councillors aren't remunerated, and there's nothing you can do formally unless they break the law, and they're locked up, and then you can remove them from positions. So there's a lot of work in that area at the moment, but I think certainly social media doesn't help, and I'd hazard a guess a very high percentage of code of conduct complaints are revolving around social media, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd be interested to dig in a little deeper, and I'll do a little research on this code of conduct approach in the UK, because it's something that has become kind of a personal mission of mine. Is this idea of how do we restore civility in our public discourse, especially at the local level? How do we move away from this toxicity? Because it's gotten to a level where we're losing good, talented public servants, both on the elected side and the staff side. And since I started this platform, so many city managers in particular have reached out to me and expressed what they have gone through. And they watched an episode and they said, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was it's nice to know I'm not alone." There are so many people that are just really in need of psychological care as a result of what's happening in the profession, how personal it's gotten, and that's always been a part of the system, public criticism, and that's healthy. That's the way the system is designed. But there is a line that can be crossed where it becomes not healthy and not appropriate. And how do we address that? How do we try to restrict that while at the same time maintaining freedom of speech? And it's a tricky topic.
It is, and I'd fair game is not the phrase I would use, but I think when you certainly sign up to be a councillor, you're far more aware, I'd say, that the role comes with public attention. It's a civic duty, it's a public duty,
yes.
And you're very much in the eye, making decisions that not everyone will agree with.
Yeah.
Now, you'd hope that where there are disagreements, they're very polite. Sadly, that's not always the case, and I can think of very poor examples of how things have escalated. But I think from the officer point of view, when you are a clerk, a town clerk, a city clerk, I don't think that same thought process takes place, and it shouldn't take place. I don't think you should see yourself in the same way in that firing line, because you are simply trying to the best of your abilities, serve the will of the council and what's right for your community. And again, it may well be that people disagree with the views that you take. But when that becomes personal, and again, I've seen it take highly personal attacks, local Facebook pages calling for people to resign, attacking decisions, so on and so forth. And I'm sure it's not dissimilar in the US, though thankfully it's a minority. It's horrible, for people who want to do good. And that's the benefits of that civility and respect pledge, I think, is that it has raised awareness of what conduct is right, what conduct is wrong, and that people aren't alone. And so, perhaps it sounds like we might be a little bit further ahead in terms of that awareness point. But we're only very much, at the start of that journey. And it goes across all, it's not just local government, it's national politics, national debates taking place where there is that ferociousness. And sadly, out of our hands, I think, at a local level. But I think every little bit that we can do to take out that heat out of the debate and to allow people to be heard, but heard in a measured and mannered way, is a step in the right direction.
No, I agree. And as in the UK, a clerk or executive officer, and here in the United States as a city manager, it used to be that role was seen as completely apolitical, right? I mean, your job is to execute the policy directives of the elected body, right? And that is still the case. It's still the expectation, but the public, the shift has been that the public now often tries to drag the appointed executive into the political fray, right? And to not just target the elected officials and policy decisions that are made at the elected level, but to bring the appointed executive in and distribute the blame there as well, which is really an unfortunate development in my mind.
It is, and I don't think we've quite got to that level. There will certainly be people who accuse one person of supporting someone over another, but I don't think it's quite at the sort of party political level, if that makes sense. It's very much sort of personality battles. I'm always very wary, and it's certainly not a common route for clerks to have served as councillors. So it's something that I'm always very wary of. I'm very open with the councils that I've worked for, that I have had and do currently serve, albeit independently, as a councillor, that I've been involved in party politics. And I will give, although our councillors all must do a public declaration of interests, things that show their affiliations and so on, I've always done a voluntary one as an officer to be fully transparent on that point of view. Because the last thing I'd want to do is attract flack or disagreements to the council because of my history. But that's a decision I've taken, and one I'm comfortable with. And I don't think it should be one that other officers have to make. They should feel comfortable in their role and to serve as exactly as you've said, fairly and independently and serve everyone on their council and in their city or town. And it is a shame when that politics does get brought into it, but it's sadly increasing.
At the executive level, in the UK, at the parish level, is there an expectation of neutrality?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
So where there is that party politics, where you have got an administration and an opposition, they tend still not to be structured in a confrontational way. People still work generally quite collaboratively, although not everywhere. And where you do have rival camps, if you like, whatever the colours or creeds of the parties, as an officer, you are there to serve them all. You are there to support everyone in their right to raise questions, to raise motions, to make their voice heard. And of course, everything is a matter for the full council to resolve. So we don't have any executive powers that are passed to a chairman or a mayor. Every decision either sits by full council or anywhere delegated beyond it to officers or committees. So it tends to take that risk of neutrality being breached out of it. But of course, it doesn't protect you from immunity from being accused. Right.
I'm curious about the relationship between the elected councillors and the executive, the clerk, and the other staff underneath you as a clerk. In your case, that's one individual, but in large organizations, there would be quite a few more. One of the things we talk about a lot here, and you're seeing more and more commonly in city manager contracts here, is essentially a non-interference clause where the system is supposed to work in such a way that the elected body gives direction to the manager, the executive, by majority vote of the body, and then all direction to the staff below the manager comes from the manager. So the elected body, the elected officials individually or as a body are not supposed to give direction to the staff other than through the city manager. Yes. or the executive. Is it the same in the UK?
Generally, that principle carries, and it really ought to. Yes, so you've sort of got a head of paid service, if you like, is a phrase sometimes used, and they are accountable to the council, and everyone else is accountable to them or whatever chain below them. And I think it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It means that the council members have only one point of contact, and that person carries that authority and responsibility and accountability for the people under them. Occasionally, you will have discrepancies. Perhaps there'll be other paid officers that report to the full council and are managed there, but less common. I know certainly in other councils I've worked in where we've had a couple of employees, it may well be that an officer below me is responsible for that engagement with councillors on certain issues. I've not got a problem with that. But the formal direction sounds very similar to what you've got. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that principle applies here. It's okay to have contact and even for an elected official to seek information from the head of any department in the organization. But the distinction is giving direction, right? And the direction should go through the executive. I'm curious what you're experiencing over there in terms of level of trust between the public and the local level of government. Are you seeing challenges there, a general decline in public trust of local government?
I think it's fair to say that we are, but I would also argue it's probably somewhat undeserved. I think a lot of it stems from our national politics and regional politics, where there's perhaps far more controversial debates happening, and they must happen. But generally, we're seeing turnout at elections decline. So less people are taking their opportunity to stand in elections, be it local or national. Less people are voting, which means that there is more of a disconnect from the public in terms of who's representing them and what they're doing. And again, I think a lot of it is down to that social media side of things too. The ability to respond so quickly to things means suddenly everyone has an opinion on everything instantly, rather than getting their weekly newspaper and seeing everything as a whole, perhaps not even that often. At a local level, what that means is often there is a natural distrust that we've got to fight against, rather than working from a positive opinion and building on that. We've got to really build up our reputation. And because we've got that flexibility in terms of the services and the support that we deliver, there are some great examples where councils really have a really positive relationship, but they have had to put the time in and earn it against a backdrop of probably distrust, rather than there being a natural affinity with the local government, with councillors out there. So it's an uphill battle, but one I think that our sector certainly is winning over time, once you put that time and effort into it.
It is striking, the similarities. It's almost like that ocean doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Now, you've spent time now in the U.S. and presumably you've spent some time evaluating, how our system works compared to yours, and you do consulting work. So I'm wondering if you were to come to the U.S. As a consultant, what are the areas you see where U.S. local governments could potentially learn from the British approach?
That's a good question, and one I'll have to be very careful in answering, won't I? Not to upset anyone.
We don't do careful on this show. we do candid.
No, it's a good question. And I mean, a lot of the processes, and like I said, there's a lot of similarities, but I think there's some small quirks that I was picking up on in the last couple of weeks, and for the last few months I've liaised with US clerks where things are different. I think the relationship with the public is different. And although in the UK we very much carry that same principle of everything being open and everything being transparent, I think it's taken far further in the US than we do. We have a Freedom of Information Act too. It came in far later than yours. But I'd say our powers don't go anywhere near as far. There are limits. Whereas what I understand is it's pretty much they can ask for anything and everything, and you've got a duty to go through it. I was speaking with a lot of frustrated clerks and administrators who've had to go through all the records, digging things out.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of our freedoms, if you like, in that response, there is a sort of, I would argue, a common sense clause to it. There is a natural point where I think with us, we've got a time limit. I think it's about 20 odd hours. If the request takes more than that, well, we can charge you for the time that we put in. So that sort of gentle curbing of the relationship with the public, I think is a useful step. That's not to say that there shouldn't be that right to public information. It's something I absolutely, stand by. It's a very useful thing, but having those sort of caveats, I think we've got far more of those in our processes. And I appreciate that's probably federal, state level, rather than municipalities. But that sort of approach of not being too scared to put your foot down at times, I think is a useful one. And it's certainly something that I picked up a little bit on.
So I'm curious with all the different hats that you wear, but particularly in the clerk role, what does an average day look like for you?
An average day, I don't think I've had an average day for a while, unfortunately.
I can relate.
It really depends on the role, really. But thinking back to my more full-time roles, obviously now I work part-time and run my own business separately. A lot of it is comms based. We have a lot of communications with residents. But because of that role, generally, whatever the size of the council is, far more overreaching and far more operational than perhaps your clerks. There's still those strategic elements, but you generally have a hand in everything. There is also the delivery of project side, which will be a very frequent role, even in very senior officers. They're very much more involved in that side of thing. And of course, managing member relations too, working with members of the council, ensuring that things are on track, that meetings coming up, they've got the right things on the agenda to make that right decision. But more broadly, taking a step back, I think it's just seeing that ownership over that vision. Whilst the direction is set by councillors and the council members, putting in place exactly who is doing what and when and how is how I'd sum it up, really. It's a bit of everything is the cheats way, but that core operation is really making sure you're on top of every single operation that's going on, ready for queries to come in.
That sounds very familiar.
Yes.
Phyllis, I'm wondering, as a clerk, you've now traveled to the United States and met with a lot of clerks here. Is there any kind of organization or effort to facilitate conversation and collaboration kind of internationally amongst clerks?
Absolutely. And of course, as well as the IIMC, International Institute, who do a great role. And I'm looking forward actually to the new incoming President Lee visiting the UK later this year. There's other organisations out there too. So Clerks Without Borders is a great small organisation that looks at pairing almost mentor clerks with a clerk from another country. So I've just been partnered with someone from Arizona, I think. So it's a great way to keep in touch and find out what those differences are, what those similarities are against the role. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. At least it's not cost me anything yet. And I think it's a great way to learn about how things are done in a different area. And I'm very much looking forward to be more involved in it. Absolutely.
I love that. I will check that out. That's something I'd be interested in. I'm a big proponent of coming together and having community and supporting one another in this profession, and to have the ability to do that, not just locally, but internationally. That's phenomenal.
It is. Like I say, I'm really looking forward to it. And I've met lots of other European colleagues who are involved in it, who really do enjoy and have very strong relations actually with their mentors and partners to the program. So I thoroughly recommend it. But I apologise to whoever gets stuck with me.
Very good. Well, I'll also include a link to Clerks Without Borders in the show notes too. So if people are interested, they could check that out as well. Now, one of the areas that you focused a lot on is AI and how local governments can best implement it. Maybe talk about that. I mean, it's a hot topic. AI is everywhere, and it's changing so rapidly, which is one of the challenges that I'm dealing with now. Is we're evaluating in our organization how best to utilize AI and what programs to use. And it just seems like every week there's something new. I feel like by the time we pick something and get it fully implemented, it'll be obsolete. Maybe talk a little bit about your work on the AI side with local government.
No, great stuff. And I think a lot of it comes from that perceived duty of being one of the younger people working in the sector. There are some wonderfully technically competent people who work in local government of all creeds and colours. There are some who don't necessarily have those skills, and why would they? It shouldn't be a prerequisite. But I think as technology evolves, particularly around artificial intelligence, I certainly see it as a duty for local government, for parish and town councils, same in the US, to explore what is possible to help deliver their services and do their work more effectively, more efficiently, to deliver the best possible result for the best possible price to local people. So that's what really piqued my interest in AI. And I wouldn't say I necessarily come from a technical background. I can just about spell AI, and that's about it. But I've had the pleasure for a number of years now working with some of the leading companies in the UK as a consultant now, previously in my roles on councils, in developing tailored AI products, as well as training people on those general tools, ChatGPT, Copilot, and so on. But I think a really big part of it is the awareness of risks. Mm-hmm. It's not just knowing what they can do, it's knowing when not to use them. And that's something I really picked up in the US at the IIMC conference, is that awareness of risks. And in some places, an abject fear, I think, of using those tools. In the UK, we've got very similar rules, data protection and safety concerns. But I think people are far more obliging to use those tools within those that framework of rules. And what I picked up from a number of clerks is there were some that wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, as we say, wouldn't go anywhere near it out of real fear. And that concern is a strong word, but I think that's something that will need to be worked on by the sector in the US over time, in my view. I was fortunate to attend, there was 3 of the 9 sessions at IIMC actually focusing on AI. So it's a very hot topic there. And I know that there are a lot of companies out there targeting specifically to municipalities. I have to admit, I'm part of one as well. So we run a company in the UK gearing AI specifically at town and parishes. And we're looking to launch a Civic Assist in the US to do very similar. But it's knowing, as you've said, the right tool, how to use it, where to use it, and using it correctly too. And all of that takes a lot of time and effort. So although the end goal might be saving time, saving money, there is obviously a cost of time and money, often when councils, and it's the same in the UK as I feel it is in the US, that often isn't there to start. So there's that initial investment, I think, too, is a big barrier, but it's one that needs to be overcome in my view. In general, are local governments moving too quickly or too slowly with AI implementation? Good question. I'd say generally there's probably scope to move quicker. There's absolutely the right thing to do to tread carefully and cautiously. But when you operate in that safe environment, in other words, you highlight some low risk tasks, and I've built some of the guidance for example, in Wales, part of the UK. I wrote some of the guidance there that's gone out, and the big point I made was start small. Start with the low hanging fruit. What are the easy tasks that you can start trying AI with? and then build your awareness and understanding before you deal with some of the more complex things, more sensitive data, find the right tools to use them. So I think there is scope to move quicker than there are. And I actually do think the UK is moving quicker than the US on AI in local government. And we're not moving quickly. We're not moving quickly at all. But that's something that surprised me, really. With a lot of the big tech companies certainly being based your way on rather than our way. I thought there would have been a more acceptance, but I think it just comes down to that natural risk adversity, keeping away from the risks of local government. And long may that continue. But I do think there's got to be a point where it's worth taking the plunge in a very sensible and measured way.
Is this something you're actively consulting for local governments on?
Absolutely. So I work quite closely with a number of councils and companies in the UK. It's quite a big area of the work that I'm involved in. And it's actually something I've had a couple of queries in the US about, both on training and our new product. So hopefully it's something that I can support in the US on as well, fingers crossed. But there aren't that many people out there doing it and with a knowledge of the sector. And I think that's an important bit, because I think when there's someone with an expertly technical background comes along, but perhaps without that understanding of the sector and the challenges that we work in, as you've said, increasingly common across the borders, I do think it does make it harder to bring that natural guard down to be open to new technologies. I'd be the same. I have been the same. But I do think it's something that appetite for measured risk, I think, is something that always has a place in local government, but is often hidden away.
Well, I know it's something that local governments here are grappling with currently. A lot of city managers are trying to figure out how to navigate this. A lot of department heads are asking for tools, and organizations trying to figure out what the right path is. Do you have a website or something where people would go and take a look at what you've been putting out on this, or if someone is interested in having a consultant with a fantastic British accent, can they reach out to you and you can help them out? Of course,
yes. So over the last year, I've set up Lewis Anderson Enterprises, a company that obviously naturally focuses in the UK, but we are looking at expanding more to the US for exactly if you've set out training and support, either for those in local government or bodies that work with local government and municipalities. So more than happy to be contacted by UK and US clerks if there's any support, even if it's just a friendly conversation to point in the right direction to some useful tools. I'd love to be contacted and enjoy what to me is a very interesting accent over the pond as well.
So how can people get in touch with you?
So website lewisandersonenterprises.co.uk. I think I've got .com as well, or I've got my email address. Lewis@lewisandersonenterprises.co.uk. You can try giving me a phone call, but it'll probably cost you a fortune. But looking at what I can do about that actually at the minute.
Very good. Well, we'll put links in the show notes to your website and to your email address so that people can reach out to you. But all right, let's have some fun. Let's do a quick lightning round here. Let's try to keep the responses to under a minute. Just a few quick lightning round questions here. Give me one misconception Americans have about British local government.
Good question. I think one of the things that came out the most really is that we are almost toothless or powerless. And like I said, we don't have those formal powers, but that flexibility to do what we want when we want, if you like, is a really powerful tool in my view. And it allows us to be a thorn in the side or a brilliant partner to those upper tier councils, whether they like us or not. So I think that's the best kind of power, is a flexible power.
I agree. It sounds nice, actually. Yeah. All right, let's flip that around. One misconception Brits may have about American local government.
I think naturally people would assume it is very party political, and it's something I really enjoyed going around, even in the little bit of time I had, is all the election boards everywhere. And even though people are very much promoting themselves and they're very much involved in that campaign, because that doesn't happen as much here, the party politics often isn't as involved. So I think that's something that certainly the conversations I've had stuck out
Would you say the perception in the UK of Americans is that everything is very political?
I think so, absolutely. One side of the coin or the other. But it was quite refreshing, really, to see the other side of that, really. And I loved, there's some very interesting posters, and I wish all of them good luck. But there's some for the wonderful colours I hope getting more than others. But that's as little political insight I could offer, sadly.
All right. What is the most underrated skill in public service?
I think it's that ability to be bold and be open and push forward. I think quite often people see their role as a management role rather than a leadership role. So being able to carve out your own leadership style and leave your imprint on the work that you do without overstepping the mark and encroaching on the role of elected members, I think is quite a nuanced thing to have to do. But once you get there, and once you can leave that mark that is distinctively you, I think there's even more pride in the role than there is normally.
I like that. Okay, if you were Harry Potter and you could wave a magic wand, what is one reform you would make immediately in local government?
I think that point to standards I mentioned before would be a very big one. One of the issues we have is quite often elections aren't contested. So frankly, anyone who puts their name forward can be elected because there aren't enough people standing for there to be an election. Yeah. So having strong standards and a way to remove people from public office as well as getting them there, and a standards regime that actually had teeth could do something, I think would work wonders, certainly in the UK, to maintaining a far higher level of standard across the board. And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that.
All right, coffee or tea during council meetings?
I don't drink coffee. I had some, I will say very delicately, some very interesting cups of tea while in the US. There's some very nice, some others as well. But no, only tea for me if we're lucky, although at the minute it's that hot. I think a good water bottle for the moment.
I'm sure our tea game cannot compete with
no,
the UK.
And that is hot tea, which I had to keep clarifying, not the iced variety.
Yes.
If there's any ice that goes in my tea, I've done something wrong, I'm afraid.
Okay, give us one piece of advice for someone entering public service today.
I think, back to your earlier point, I think there's a lot of people that rightly or wrongly are scared off. They see something that they don't like and have a natural adversity to it. And I do think that's a big thing, keeping younger people from entering the sector rather than those that have perhaps used to the cut and thrust. So I think give it a chance is the best advice I can give. If the municipality or council you found isn't the right fit, that doesn't mean they all aren't. And there is such a variety in the US as there is the UK that there will be the right role and the right council for you. If you're standing as a councillor, you've perhaps got less flexibility, but there will be that right role out there. So give it time, give it chance.
I think that's great. Absolutely. We absolutely desperately need good people, smart people, ethical people, willing to enter the profession.
Absolutely.
Well, Lewis, thank you so much for joining us today. This has really been a pleasure to speak with you. Really, I was honored when you reached out. I thought, well, someone from across the ocean has watched this podcast. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for reaching out.
No, thanks, Chris. And I've loved what I've seen so far, and I'll certainly promote it more to my colleagues. Perhaps you'll be growing a UK following after this. Perhaps not while I'm on it. Perhaps after they'll want more interesting people than me. But no, it's been a pleasure and lovely to speak with you.
Well, likewise. And next time you're out this way, maybe we can connect. And maybe if I have a growing audience in the UK, I'll have a good excuse to head out your way. I'd
absolutely, and try some proper tea. Sounds good to me.
Yes. All right, Lewis. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Lovely to see you.
I think one of the most interesting takeaways from this conversation is that while the structures of local government may differ dramatically between the United States and the United Kingdom, the human experience of public service is remarkably similar. Whether you're serving in a parish council in Staffordshire or a city hall in California, public servants today are navigating rising expectations, political tension, limited resources, social media pressures, and communities that are often frustrated, anxious, and deeply divided. But despite all of that, there are still talented people stepping into these roles because they care about their communities and believe local government matters. And honestly, conversations like this are important because they remind us that the challenges we face are not isolated. Public servants around the world are wrestling with many of the same questions about leadership, professionalism, trust, technology, and the future of governance. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes of Gov360. Also, subscribe to the Gov360 newsletter on LinkedIn. It's free, and LinkedIn is where we can connect and continue the conversation. Keep an eye out for the soon-to-launch Gov360 community on Patreon. More information about that coming very soon. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for joining us on Gov360. Until next time, govern boldly, my friends.